Or did he manufacture some other figure? Hello everyone. What Christ was Paul preaching? Was he preaching Jesus? Or did he manufacture some other figure? Now in the video, series 3E5, a couple of weeks ago, we covered the contrasts between the teachings of Jesus and Paul. We're going to take that a little bit further today. As I stated in that video, we will now return to Romans chapters 9, 10, and 11. Let's go straight in. Romans chapter 9 and verses 30 through to 33. What then will we say? That the Gentiles who did not pursue righteousness have obtained it? A righteousness that is by faith. But Israel, who pursued the law of righteousness, has not attained it. And why not? Because their pursuit was not by faith, but as if it were by works. They stumbled over the stumbling stone, as it is written. See, I lay in Zion a stone of stumbling and a rock of offense. And the one who believes in him will never be put to shame. So, what is Paul teaching here? See that the Gentiles who weren't pursuing righteousness somehow actually attained it simply by believing in what? Well, believing in what Paul was teaching them, having faith in that. And that Israel couldn't and didn't attain that righteousness because they could not accept the Christ he was presenting to them. What was this Christ he, Paul, was presenting? Well, he doesn't tell just that this Christ died, was buried, and resurrected, and that he, Paul, had personally met this Christ in visions. Now, explaining that this Christ's death was a sacrifice for atonement of sins of the whole world, and that it replaced the annual temple sacrifices which took place on each annual Day of Atonement. But this sacrifice was just once, and it was everlasting. That was Paul. That's his teaching. Now, let's compare this with what Jesus taught. Now, please listen carefully. We're going to go to Matthew 15 and verses 21 through to 28, so we get the full context. Leaving that place, Jesus withdrew to the district of Tyre and Sidon. And a Canaanite woman from that region came to him crying out, Lord, Son of David, have mercy on me. My daughter is miserably possessed by a demon. But Jesus did not answer a word. So his disciples came to him and urged him, Send her away, for she keeps crying out after us. He answered, Jesus that is, he answered, I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. The woman came and knelt before him. Lord, help me, she said. But Jesus replied, It is not right to take the children's bread and toss them to the dogs. Yes, Lord, she said. Even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table. O woman, Jesus answered, your faith is great. Let it be done for you as you desire. And of course, her daughter was healed from that very hour. So, what are we learning from this? Well, this woman, remember, this was taking place outside of Israel, Tyre and Sidon. Okay. Now, this woman, she didn't just believe that Jesus could cure her daughter. No, she took his insults and absorbed them in humility. Remember, he referred to her kind, non-Israelites that is, as dogs. Now, that is quite an insult. Yet, she acted humbly and still pressed him to help her. See, her faith revealed itself in her humble actions. She had clearly heard about Jesus and trusted him from all that she had heard and may have even seen him. The Christ Paul preached, he didn't need to be known except his death, his burial, and resurrection. Would you say Paul was preaching the same person that this Canaanite woman had heard and possibly even seen? Think about it. All right, let's move on to chapter 10. Romans chapter 10. And we're going to go through verses 8 through to 10. What does it say? The word is near to you. It is in your mouth and in your heart. That is the word of faith we are proclaiming. That if you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For with your heart you believe and are justified, and with your mouth you confess and are saved. You notice what the word was that Paul is talking about here. It was the word of faith he was proclaiming. He's not referring to scriptures here, is he? See, all they had to do was to accept Jesus as Lord and believe God raised him from the dead. And of course, keep this in mind. This Lord was no longer any threat to the Roman authorities because he was dead. But we'll come to that later in Romans chapter 13. Now, what about Jesus? Okay, let's turn our attention to Luke chapter 7 and verses 44 through to 49. This is what we read, verse 44. And turning toward the woman, he said to Simon, do you see this woman? When I entered your house, you did not give me water for my feet, but she wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You did not greet me with a kiss, but she has not stopped kissing my feet since I arrived. You did not anoint my head with oil, but she has anointed my feet with perfume. Therefore, I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven, for she has loved much. But he who has been forgiven little loves little. Then Jesus said to her, your sins are forgiven. But those at the table began to say to themselves, who is this who even forgives sins? Jesus was teaching Peter. Remember, Peter who believed Jesus was the Messiah. He was teaching Peter that his belief had to be demonstrated in loving action. And again, nothing about Jesus having to die for sins to be forgiven. Nothing. Was Paul teaching this Jesus? What do you think? All right, back to Paul again. Romans 10 and verses 1 through to 4. Brothers, my heart's desire and prayer to God for the Israelites is for their salvation. For I testify about them that they are zealous for God, but not on the basis of knowledge, because they were ignorant of God's righteousness and sought to establish their own. They did not submit to God's righteousness. For Christ is the end of the law, to bring righteousness to everyone who believes. Notice, Christ is the end of the law. This is a new doctrine. Paul is introducing the end of the law. If we just reflect back on Romans chapter 5 and verse 9, where Paul, again, he says, therefore, since we have now been justified by his blood, how much more shall we be saved from the wrath through him? In other words, being declared righteous. And how does this come about? Through his Christ's blood sacrifice, which ended the law covenant. However, what did Jesus teach? Matthew 9 and verse 13. But go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. For I have not come to call the righteous, but the sinners. Now, we covered this quite well in a previous video, didn't we? Remember Matthew 5 and verses 17 and 18? Let's go over that again. Matthew 5 verses 17 and 18 from the Sermon on the Mount. Verse 17. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For I tell you truly, until heaven and earth pass away, not a single jot, not a single stroke of a pen will disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. Is Paul teaching this Jesus? What do you think? Well, let's go on to Romans chapter 11 now, verses 5 and 6. In the same way, at the present time, there is a remnant chosen by grace. And if it is by grace, then it is no longer by works. Otherwise, grace would no longer be grace. What's he doing here? He's doubling down here on works not being necessary. Now, how powerful an argument was this? Well, what do we see today? How many denominations in Christendom today promote that same message? Believe on the Lord and you will be saved. You see that slogan even on car bumper stickers. It's probably one of the most famous marketing slogans in history. So, what Christ was Paul preaching? See, we individually have to decide. But if life is that simple, well, is it that simple? As many apologists for Paul would rightly argue, and why not? Because that is what they believe. And many of you watching this video fall into the same category. Why? Because we've been brought up to believe that. But where does the truth actually reside? See, we clearly need to understand more. So in the next video, now not the shorter background ones, in the next video, we're going to examine where and when did this whole idea of blood sacrifice as an atonement for sin originate. And then we can return back to Romans and move on then there from chapter 12 onwards. Okay, so until then, thank you very much.